phase one of your fiscal strategy as announced today is about the supports for the economy. You said that the trigger to move to the second step will be well under 6% unemployment. You could be in phase one for a few years, couldn't you?
We'll print the numbers for the unemployment projections and forecasts in the budget in under 2 weeks' time. But today's speech about the fiscal strategy was all about the recalibration. Pre-COVID, as you know, we were on track for a surplus, the first surplus in 12 years. We'd achieved the first balanced budget in 11 years off the back of declining unemployment. When we came to government, it was 5.7%. We got it down to 5.1%. Welfare dependency was at a 30-year low. The annual growth in government spending was among the lowest in 50 years. So we were on the steady path to paying back that debt. Then COVID hit. And as you know, there's a big hole, Kieran, in the Australian economy. It's been a hit on the supply side and on the demand side. So we've recalibrated the fiscal strategy into 2 stages. The first part of that strategy is all about letting the automatic stabilisers work, whether it's on tax receipts or payments, continuing the temporary, the targeted support to get more people into work, but also the structural reforms like the one I announced today about insolvency changes. These are all about helping businesses stay in business and people.
Yeah, I'll get into that in a moment, that insolvency change that you've made, but on the unemployment rate, that's going to be the trigger. It's got to be well under 6% before you start paying down debt. It's going to be a fair while before it's under 6%.
Even before you start reducing your debt as a share of GDP, and that's the key point.
And it's going to be a fair while before it's under 6%.
Well, again, we'll print those numbers in less than 2 weeks' time. The unemployment rate fell from 7.5 to 6.8% last month. That was the single biggest fall in 32 years.
Will that continue?
We think that the unemployment rate will tick up again off the back of what's happening in Victoria, Kieran. But last month we saw 111,000 jobs being created. Over the last 3 months we've seen 458,000 jobs being created, 60% of which went to women and 40% went to young people. So outside of Victoria, jobs are being created, restrictions are being eased. But of course in Victoria with the stage 4 restrictions, there is an expectation that many people will lose their jobs and businesses may have to close.
You say that gross and net debt will stabilise before heading down. In your speech today you said that. Is that dependent on the COVID situation also stabilising? Because if we get a second wave, heaven forbid, in another state, you have to start all over again.
Well, of course the economic recovery, the speed and the trajectory of the economic recovery is contingent upon having a COVID-safe environment and getting the virus under control. As a country, Kieran, we were doing really well until that second wave in Victoria and to the shambles of the quarantine situation in Victoria. That has really cost the Victorian and the national economy tens of billions of dollars.
It could happen again in another state.
And that is why we need to maintain the most effective testing and tracing regime. That is why we need to have effective quarantine measures, and that is why we continue to provide federal support in so many different ways to the states and the territories.
So the forecast that it's going to stabilise and then start to come down, it is all dependent on that COVID situation, isn't it? Well, if we see a second wave, you have to start again.
Kieran, this is a health crisis primarily, with massive, severe economic impacts. And you're seeing second waves right around the world. In the United Kingdom, thousands of cases a day. In France, India is seeing many thousands of cases, obviously, of a bigger population. But we are seeing right around the world that the COVID situation and the trajectory of new cases has been rising.
My colleague Andrew Clennell reported this week that JobKeeper is going to end in March, according to the budget. Why are you going to end it then? Isn't it, given the economy remains weak, isn't it appropriate to keep some sort of subsidy in place?
Well, Kieran, as you know, JobKeeper is the single largest economic support program that any Australian government has ever undertaken. We've costed it at just over $100 billion. It was originally legislated for 6 months. It's now going out for another 6 months. And in the state of Victoria, there is an expectation that those people in Victoria who are on JobKeeper will represent 60% of all people on JobKeeper in the December quarter and in the March
Won't they need it beyond March?
So we're hoping that the restrictions will be well eased by then, people will be back into work, and that the economy there and across the country is recovering. JobKeeper has always been a temporary and targeted program. What you'll see in the budget is the next phase of support from the government designed to boost aggregate demand, whether it's sector specific or more broadly, and designed to get people off the unemployment queue into work.
And that's a short-term incentive for business, something like that? Is that what you're looking at?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on speculation. What I'm going to say is all will be revealed on budget night on October the 6th.
Jobseeker, the supplement, you doubled basically the Jobseeker payment, the old dole. Do you accept halving that supplement? It's still higher than what it was, but halving it will reduce demand significantly beyond this into this next quarter.
Well, you're assuming that there are no other measures. You're assuming that we're not going to be spending extra money in the budget. What the Jobseeker payment is doing is transitioning from that $550 coronavirus supplement down to $250. We have said at the end of this year that we will make another announcement about future support.
And you'll keep it?
And we've said that we'll be leaning in.
Yeah, leaning in means you'll keep it, but
well,
surely you can't take it back to what it was.
Again, I'm not going to get into that area of speculation. We haven't made those decisions about that rate beyond December. We will make decisions about the Jobseeker payment at that time, closer to the end of the year. But in the budget, there is going to be other measures, Kieran, that are designed to boost aggregate demand across the economy, that are designed to get people back into work. They're both on the demand side, where we're spending money, but also on the supply side, where we're making it easier for businesses to do business, getting more flexible labour markets, providing, as we have done today on insolvency and other red tape reduction.
And will you be pushing again, will you include in the budget the original company tax cuts?
Again, you can get into that realm of what's in and what's out. That's an endless game. I am not going to play that less than 2 weeks to go into the budget.
Yeah, almost a week. But the BCA wants a 20% investment allowance.
Sure.
You're not ruling in or out, but is that something you're open to?
The BCA have put in their requests. The Australian Chamber of Commerce have put in their requests. The Australian Industry Group have put in their requests. There are endless requests from endless number of bodies. They've all been getting a hearing, but we've worked it through. We've got a fiscal envelope and we'll be making decisions in accordance with that.
What about income tax cuts? Because I know you're bringing the second phase forward. Is that going to be the same parameters as what the original tax cuts were? Yeah,
this is pin the tail on the donkey, is it today?
I'm not calling you that.
No, you're not, and I'm not calling you. What we have said about tax cuts is that the Australian people made a decisive choice at the last election. There were two competing.
Yeah.
There were two competing plans that were put to the Australian people.
So you're going to maintain that plan as it was?
Well, Kieran, there were two competing plans. One was for nearly $400 billion of extra taxes. That came from the Labor Party. Ours was for $158 billion of tax cuts. We successfully legislated that through the Parliament. The stages of those tax cuts, the timing of those tax cuts are being considered in the context of this budget, but I make this important point. You cut taxes, you put money into people's pockets. Put more money into people's pockets, they will spend, and that will create jobs. And it will encourage aspiration. So it's consistent with our party's values, the Liberals and the Nationals. It's consistent with our values to cut taxes, to reduce that burden, to let people keep more money that they have earned and they have worked for.
A few other ones before you go. How dependent is the budget on trade stabilising, the trade relationship stabilising with China?
Well, China is our most important trading partner. More than $200 billion of two-way trade. We're a very important source of imports for them, particularly resources. Think iron ore, think gas, critical.
But will it stabilise? Because it seems very fragile right now.
And of course, they are a major source of students, tourists to the Australian economy as well. So we'll continue to work through some of those issues in the relationship, but it is a relationship that is of substantial importance to both countries. And we will always set out very clear lines based on our national interest. And whether that was about an independent review into the COVID-19 crisis, whether that is in relation to the South China Sea, whether that's on human rights, whether that's on trade issues, we will be clear and consistent.
Are you still open to Chinese investment?
Yes.
On insolvency practices, a small business particularly, the announcement today, how many businesses will be saved by that debt restructuring?
There's about 2,000 businesses that have been saved by our temporary relief measures that would otherwise be going through the insolvency process now. They will now go through this new system which gives businesses the best chance to restructure their liabilities, to work them through with creditors and to get out on the other side. By putting in a $1 million limit on the liabilities for the businesses that can access this new system, this Chapter 11 type of system, that will cover around 76% of all businesses that go through the insolvency process, and 98% of those businesses have less than 20 employees. So it's overwhelmingly small and medium-sized businesses that will now have better control over their repayment schedule that can negotiate with the creditors.
You spoke of the Victorian situation earlier. The letters obtained by Sky News this week, Andrew Clennell reporting via Freedom of Information that the PM urged the Premier in July to accept ADF support. He says it was critical in terms of contact tracing and so on, that be done properly. How difficult was it to get the Victorian government to accept that assistance at the time?
Kieran, this was written confirmation of what we have known all along, that the federal government had offered ADF support to Victoria. Unfortunately, Victoria turned that down in favour of private security guards. And the tragedy that unfolded subsequent to that has been a disaster for Victoria and for the nation. So those letters confirm what we know.
And in terms of your discussions with the Prime Minister at the time, was there frustration from him that he was writing letters? This was in July, these letters, July 4 and 11, that he was having to say, please take...
Well, I'm obviously not going to go into my discussions with our Prime Minister. What I am going to say is that that offer was on the table. It was not taken up. It should have been taken up. And the tragedy of the quarantine situation in Victoria has cost my state and it's cost Victorians very dearly.
The Deputy Premier in Queensland has had a go at you. He says that you've been lying about the federal government's withdrawal of some level of support from the ADF in terms of their border supports. He wants you to apologise.
He's a fool. I mean, the reality is we have provided support to Queensland and will continue to provide support to Queensland. What we have done is provided ADF support and we'll continue to provide that, but we're redeploying ADF support to quarantine. We are ensuring that the ADF can go and deal with some of these high-risk weather events that we're expecting. As you know, the ADF have played a remarkable role, whether it's around the fires, whether it's been with the floods, whether it's now with COVID-19. The ADF...
Mr Miles said that you claimed Queensland did not ask for ongoing assistance from the Army on their borders.
Well, he obviously can't read. The question that was put to me was whether the movement of ADF personnel was designed deliberately to sabotage Queensland's border policy. Never heard such rubbish. He should not be so loose with his language.